Today overview, we'll be discussing the philosophical origins, good life and happiness, and then limitations of science and technology. For our objectives, we'll review first the philosophical origin of science and technology, understand the different schools of thought from ancient times, define what is good life means from past and then, analyze the impact of technology on society, and then reflect on human condition in the context of science and technology. So science originated from philosophy. Literally, philosophy means love of wisdom. Is the investigation of the nature of knowledge, existence, and reality. Philosophy provided foundations for science. Science naturally originated from philosophy. Science seeks objective truth through empiricism. Science and technology also have limitations. We go now to the philosophical background. There are some key figures of metaphysics, epistemology, empiricism. So ancient Greeks pondered heavily about the concept of life and the universe. So they had asked about the nature of human, the pursuit of happiness and good, and the purpose of the universe. And so we have Socrates. Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living according to him. He is one of the philosophers who focuses on the world and psychological issues and challenge existing ideas. Due to his ideology, Socrates was condemned and put to death by Athenian society. So that is according to him. Next we have Plato. Plato was student of Socrates and became the most influential Western philosophers. He founded the academy, and Plato focused on systematized logic for metaphysics and epidemiology. Next we have Aristotle. So Aristotle served as tutor to Alexander the Great, and he focused on systematized logic. Plato and Aristotelian, with Socrates, are considered pivotal figures in the Western philosophy. Next we have René Descartes. René Descartes was born on March 31, 1596. He was a French philosopher, scientist, and mathematician, also an important scientific thinker and an original metaphysician. So he is often considered as precursor to the nationalist school of thought. He is most commonly known for his philosophical statement, I think, therefore I am. best known for his Latin translations, cogito, ergo sum. Next, we have David Hume. David Hume was born on May 7, 1711. He was a Scottish philosopher, historian, economist, and essayist, best known for his highly influential system of empiricism, philosophical skepticism, and metaphysical naturalism. He conceived of philosophy as the inductive, experimental science of human nature. Then we have Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant was born 1724. He was a German philosopher and one of the central Enlightenment thinkers. So he was aware of living in an age when philosophy needed to supplant the role once played by religion. So he argued that the moral law is a truth of reason, and hence that all rational creatures are bound by the same moral law. We now proceed to the school of thought of the Hellenistic age. Therefore, after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, the Hellenistic age began. From this period, four major schools of philosophy emerged. So first we have cynicism, that is, denial of established norms, follow one's natural inclinations. People must reject all conventional needs, such as power, sex, and wealth, to be attuned with nature. Therefore, in cynics, they believe that the purpose of life is to live in virtue. And according to them, that people must reject all conventional needs such as power, sex, and wealth in order to attune with nature. The main figures in the cynicism are, first we have Antisthenes. Antisthenes is a student of Socrates, founder of cynicism. So he preached a life of poverty. But his teaching also covered language, dialogue, and literature, in addition to pure ethics, which later Cynics focus on. Another we have Diogenes. Diogenes, the rich, Diogenes of Sinope. So Diogenes took cynicism to its logical extreme. The archetype, cynic philosopher, he dedicated his life to self-sufficiency. That is autarkeia, austerity, that is ascesis, and shamelessness, that is anadeia. Fame for his biting satire and wit. Next, we have skepticism. So, in this skepticism, people should doubt their senses, and no one can be certain about the knowledge that we have. So, endure. The skeptics or Pyrrhonism. So, they believe that no one is sure about the knowledge we have. And according to them, we should doubt our senses, morality, and logic. Or people believe that They should doubt about their senses, morality, and logic. And in skepticism, no one can be certain about the knowledge that we have. Philosophically, position that one should refrain from making truth claims and avoid the postulation of final truth. So, no certainty about human knowledge. Then we have Epicureanism or hedonism. That is, pleasure and pain are only two important aspects of living. Happiness is achieved through pleasure. So the Epicureanism is founded by Epicurus. So they believe that we need to maximize our pleasure and minimize our pain. It is a form of hedonism where they believe that the goal of man is to obtain happiness and pleasure. Or we say that Epicureanism teaches that the greatest good is to seek modest pleasure in order to attain a state of tranquility, freedom from fear, that is ataraxia, and absence from bodily pain, that is aponia. So this combination of states is held to constitute happiness in its highest form. Epicureanism is a form of although it differs in its conception of happiness as the absence of pain and in its advocacy of a simple life. Then we have Stoicism. Stoicism, the virtue is the highest good based on perfect rationality. So we best achieve happiness when we resign ourselves to fate. So Stoics founded by Zeno of Citium. So they believe that to achieve happiness and moral goodness, we need to have perfect rationality. And by having it, we achieve apatheia or equanimity, wherein an individual is not disturbed by pain, passion, or emotion. So the fundamental idea of Kant's critical philosophy is autonomy. Human understanding is the source of general laws of nature that structure our experience, and that human reason gives itself the moral law, which is our basic basis in God, freedom, and immortality. Comes now the philosophy of science. So from empiricism, that is experience-based thinking, to logicism. Science is the study of structure and systematic behavior of physical and natural world through observation and experiment. This also refers to the body or system of knowledge derived from such studies. However, these definitions are limited in the sense that they do not include the philosophical and social aspect. So Ibn Sina, commonly known as Avicenna, was a philosopher and physician of medieval Islamic world, flourished during Islamic Golden Age and serving in various Iranian rulers. He is often described as the father of early Muslim medicine. Pertaining to his contribution, he combined Neoplatonic and especially Aristotelian philosophy with elements of Islamic theology into comprehensive system. Next, we have Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was a lawyer, philosopher, master of the English tongue. He is famous for his role in the scientific revolution, promoting experimentation as a way of glorifying good and fulfilling scriptures. He has been called the father of empiricism, which is the idea that knowledge comes from the senses. So Francis Bacon's theory was that scientific knowledge must come from the careful observation of nature, filtered through inductive reasoning. Francis Bacon is most famous for his philosophy of science, and he argued that scientific knowledge is usually obtained after making observations and then utilizing inductive reasoning to interpret the observation. He also argued that controlled scientific experimentation is essential for understanding the nature. So he is often considered as one of the founder of modern scientific research. So comes now the third one, and that is Russell Bertrand, born on May 18, 1872. So Russell Bertrand was a British philosopher, logician, and social reformer, a founding figure in the analytic movement in the Anglo-American philosophy, and was awarded a Nobel Prize in Literature. So he described his philosophy as a kind of logical atomism, by which he meant to endorse thought and metaphysical view. Regarding his philosophical work, it is generally credited to which being are the founder of analytic philosophy and also produce a body of work that usually covers logic, the philosophy of mathematics, metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. Now, regarding his view on philosophy, Russell Bertrand held that the ultimate objective of both science and philosophy was to understand reality and not simply to make predictions. Therefore, how is science being done? Therefore, this philosopher developed the scientific method, starting from Aristotle, going through the Roman as well as Islamic philosophers, and reaching the pinnacle when Francis Bacon, up to the 1626, refined a process of scientific reasoning. So during the Renaissance, Aristotle emphasizes the importance. So Aristotle emphasizes the importance of deductive reasoning. But Francis Bacon realized that it can be combined with inductive reasoning for more holistic approach to understand the universe. So when we say deduction, deduction refers to the process of obtaining a specific statement or theory from a more generalized model or observation. And when we say induction, inductive or induction, induction usually generates a generalized statement from specific observations. So the scientific method is what differentiates science from a non-science because it usually gives framework on how to approach problems as we encounter them in this universe. So there are two types of reasoning. We have the deductive, inductive, abductive. So what is the difference between inductive reasoning from the deductive reasoning? Therefore, in the inductive reasoning, you started from observation down to generalization, down to the paradigm or the theory. While in the deductive, it's just the opposite of the inductive because in the deductive, you start with the theory, then prediction, and then experiment. Therefore, to differentiate and to understand more clearly the difference between deductive versus inductive, in the deductive, you start with a theory. It is being confirmed by a hypothesis, and then you tend to do a quantitative research. While in the inductive, you start with the data, and then you infer conclusion from your data, and then you tend to do quantitative research. So in the field of modern science, we have natural, social, and formal sciences. Okay. So in the natural science, it investigates natural phenomena and they explain how things usually happen basing on its natural phenomena. When we say sciences, social sciences give insight in human behavior and societies. Anthropology, archaeology, economics, history, psychology, and sociology are considered to fall under social sciences. And lastly, we have formal sciences. Formal science is based on set of rules beforehand, or also known as priori statement theorem that can be applied and formulated. Example of these are mathematics, logic, and statistics. And therefore, in here, illustrating the universe and the branches of science, let us take, for example, in the Earth. If you will look at the Earth as to what branches of science they fall, there is physical science. It has the big circle, and the small circle is the astronomy. Physical science is the big astronomy. Under that astronomy, the branches that are included are astrophysics and cosmology. Also, the big circle, geoscience. Under that, we'll be studying the meteorology and the geology. Going now to the human mind. The human mind falls under social sciences. And branches that falls under social sciences, we have psychology and sociology. In the psychology, we'll be studying the developmental and the cognitive. While in the sociology, under that, you have the law, ethics, and economics. Pertaining now to cell. Cell falls under life sciences. In life sciences, it can either be functional or cellular. The branches of science that are considered or falls under functionals are physiology, medicine, and ecology. While in cellular, we have biochemistry, genetics, and evolution. Going now to the atom falls under physical sciences. So they are seen to be in the small dots. Under the physical sciences, we have chemistry. In chemistry, we'll be studying the material and its chemical reactions. Another one, we have the mechanics. Then we'll be discussing the quantum and the classical. Lastly, we have the formal sciences. Formal sciences, under that, the branches of science that falls under this category would be mathematics. Branches of science that are considered to be mathematics. We have algebra, computer science, and also in logic, we have philosophical, informal, and symbolic. So comes now the validity of scientific reasoning. So the Berlin and Vienna Circle, these are two groups of empiricists who maintain the verifiability principle or verificationism. So again, the Berlin Circle and Vienna Circle are groups of empiricists, also the proponent of verificationism or verifiability principle. So it is a discipline in science where a study must be observed and supported by empirical data. If not, then it is not a science. Falsification theory can be tested by experimentation. And Karl Popper, an Australian philosopher, proposed the falsification theory. Verificationism is the risk. If a principle cannot be supported by empirical evidence, then it is regarded as meaningless. Alternatively, Karl Popper proposed the falsification principle. That is, as long as the experiment is not false, it is accepted as the prevailing explanation to the relevant phenomena. Then we have the concept of good life and happiness. Good is a universal concept, believed to be the opposite of evil. So what is good is prepared and described, be it intention or action. So the Greek concept eudaimonia, which literally means good-spirited, it can also mean human progressing or prosperity. Happiness, according to different fields, we have psychology, that is the positive emotion or state arising from world being. We have also Eastern religion, that is, according to Eastern religion, happiness is a spiritual state. Under that, we have Buddhism. Buddhism, that is, freedom from cravings. We also have Hinduism, that is, freedom from cycle of birth. So biology usually interplay of genetics, brain, physiology, chemistry, human hormones, and the physical health. So eudaimonia is central to the philosophy of Aristotle. Nicomachean ethics, eudaimonia is the end goal of human action and the highest human good. The human good turns out to be activity of soul in accordance with the virtue. So eudaimonia, literal translation, good, spirited, loosely translated as happiness, more properly translated as human flourishing or prosperity. And Plato said that the highest form of happiness is morality and justice. According to Aristotle, his work, Nicomachean Ethics, relates eudaimonia to arete, meaning virtue, and philia, referring to friendship. And according to him, eudaimonia is the result of human action. And at first point, he rejected the view that technology is a means to reach the end or activity or as a human activity. So eudaimonia is analogous to the topmost position in Maslow hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization is the highest personal need because in this Maslow hierarchy of needs, there is a 5 point inside that particular pyramid. So what is the true meaning of technology? What comes first in mind? First is the application of science on our everyday problem. Also something that is a machine or a process. It comes from the Greek word techne, refers to manufacturing and arts. Techne is a part of voices. Voices bringing forth. Something that brings concealing into reveal. Again, techne is a part of voices bringing forth. Something that brings concealment into reveal. Voices is related to aletheia. Aletheia, which means truth. Voices is related to aletheia, referring to truth. And from this, we can say that technology is a way to reveal the truth and contributes to good. What is the role of technology in our lives? What could go wrong? Technology is amoral. It does not tell us what is morally right or wrong. Martin Heidegger points on his analysis of technology, and he made 3 points when he analyzes the technology. First, technology is not an instrument. It is a way of revealing the truth about the world. Second, technology is not controlled by humans. It is technology that controls the human activities. Technology is dangerous in a sense that it frames our thinking about the world. And to summarize, science naturally came from philosophy, and it uses many paradigms to search for truth about the nature. We live our lives on the prospect of good life and happiness. Technology is not only a mere device, but also a way to reveal the hidden truth. Science and technology have its limitation. It only took, it only looks for objective truth. Science and technology is amoral. It is in our hand to use it for better or for worse. So what is the philosophy of science? Philosophy of science, it is the study of the assumption, foundations, and implications of natural science. It asks questions like, what is science? What are its aims? And how will we interpret the result of science? Scienticism is a broad-based belief that the assumptions and method of research of the physical and natural sciences are equally appropriate or essential to all other disciplines, including philosophy, the humanities, and the social sciences. Positivism. Positivism is closely related to philosophy, which holds that the only authentic knowledge is scientific knowledge, and such knowledge can only come from positive affirmation of theories through strict scientific method. Therefore, when we ask what is science, so one of the central questions in the philosophy of science is distinguishing science from a non-science, although many regards the problem as unsolvable or moot. Historically, the main point of contention was between science and religion, and even today, many opponents of intelligent design claims that it does not meet the criteria of science and should not be treated on equally footing as evaluation. Because we all know that the criteria for science typically usually included the formulation of hypotheses that meet the logical criteria of contingency, falsifiability, and testability. Also, as a grounding in empirical evidence. Lastly, using the scientific method. Now, we made mention that philosophy literally means love of wisdom and the investigation of the knowledge of and the investigation of nature of knowledge, existence, and reality. And the ancient Greek philosophers are the pillars of the philosophy and considered as the first scientists. And there are two scientific methods. We have deductive reasoning. And according to Aristotle, deduction is a process of obtaining specific statement or theory from a generalized observation. While the inductive reasoning, according to Francis Bacon, he refined the scientific reasoning during the Renaissance. And according to him, induction generates a generalized statement from a specific observation. So the development of modern scientific method contributed to the accelerated advancement of science towards the end of the Renaissance, ushering the scientific revolution. This scientific method differentiates science from a non-science because it gives us framework on how to approach problems as we encounter them in this universe. We also have touched that there are three branches of science. First, we have the natural science. So the natural science usually investigate the natural phenomena. It attempts to give an explanation on how things happen and work based on careful interpretation of the empirical data. So the under the natural sciences are the physical sciences. Sample of physical sciences are chemistry, physics, earth science, astronomy, and also the biological sciences fall under the natural science. Then we have the second one, and that is the social sciences. In these social sciences, it attempts to give insight on human behavior and societies. And the branches of science that are considered that falls under the social sciences are anthropology, archaeology, economics, history, psychology, and sociology. And third one, we have the formal science. Now, this formal science is usually based on a set of rules defined beforehand. And then we call that as the priori statement. And therefore, from such rules, the theorems that can be applied to various systems are being formulated. Sample of branches of science that falls under these are mathematics, logic, and statistics. Then we have the validity of scientific reasoning. When we say validity of scientific reasoning, we have verificationism or verifiability principle. So this is a discipline. A discipline is scientific if it can be supported by empirical science. And a true science cannot be proven, only falsified. That is, according to Karl Popper. And the falsification principle. It is a hypothesis or idea that can be tested by experimentation. And as long as experiment shows that an idea is not false, it is accepted as the prevailing explanation to the relevant phenomena. And then, science is not absolute because it can only predict or state possibilities. Science cannot be used to study theological issues. So that the study of scientific method of inquiry, as well the defining of the scope and validity of science. Now, we proceed now to the good life and science and technology. We all know that the aim of science is to understand the world we are in. Thus, it will lead us to the truth. Truth is tied to good. Therefore, science and technology is connected to good life. Truth is tied good. Therefore, science and technology is connected to good life. Now, what are the reasons can we give that science and technology could be tied to good life? Well, in terms of human flourishing, we can only achieve our greatest potential if we have our basic needs that is being covered. Also, the advancement in science help us to those basic needs. But on the side of technology, technology and by extension of science, it is a way of revealing the truth about the world and the environment. So, truth is desirable. Therefore, truth leads us to good. As with science, advancement in technology ensure that the human basic needs are being covered. Now, the concept of good life and human flourishing. We also have a study that the ancient Greek philosophers not only pondered upon the nature of the universe, they also contemplated about life in general, and they usually tackled concepts such as morality, virtue, good, and happiness. So, to mention again, the Greek pioneer in the philosophy of life, we have Socrates. Socrates was a classical Greek Athenian philosopher credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy and as being the first moral philosopher of Western ethical tradition of thought. So it was Socrates who believed that living a life where you live under the rules of others in a continuous routine without examining what you actually want out of it is not worth living, and declaring that humans must scrutinize their lives in order to live and fulfill the one isn't agreeable to any extent. So that in that Socratic method, and maybe Socrates' most enduring contribution to philosophy was, and then he was put to death by the Athenian society due to his ideology. Then comes Plato. He was one of the most influential Western philosopher, founder of the Academy, the first institution of higher learning of the Western world. Now, in his metaphysics, there is a branch of philosophy that deals with first principle of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. Also, the epistemology, that is the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its method, validity, and scope. On the other hand, Aristotle was also a teacher and founder his own school of Athens known as the Lyceum. And according to him, he systematized logic. Logic is the instrument or the organon by means of which we come to know anything. Then comes the four major schools of philosophy, namely the Cynics. We have the Skeptics, the Epicureans, and then the Stoics. According to these Cynics, the purpose of life is to live in virtue. So, the meaning of this is rejecting all conventional desires for health, wealth, power, and fame, and living life free from all possessions and property. While in skeptics, these are people who should doubt their senses, morality, and logic. So the mark of skepticism is the suspension of judgment. Epicureans considered all the sensations we experience are true. There is the life worth being lived is spent seeking pleasure. And lastly, Stoics. Stoics perfect rationality. It is the key to achieve moral goodness and happiness. It is a school that focuses on how to live in a world where things don't go your way. So the idea at the heart of its acceptance of all things that are beyond your control. And then when we say good, good is a universal concept considered to be the opposite of evil, what is preferred and desired, and then constitutes good life. On the other hand, when we say happiness, in psychology, it is positive emotion, state arising from a well-being. When we say well-being, it usually includes physical health, mental health, life satisfaction, and sense of purpose. In Eastern religions, happiness means a spiritual state. In Buddhism, freedom from cravings. Hinduism, freedom from cycle of birth and death. While happiness in biology, interplay of genetics, brain physiology and chemistry, and physical health is usually involved. When we say eudaimonia, eudaimonia means good spirited. So the Greek concept of happiness, proper translation would be human flourishing or prosperity. According to Plato, it is the highest form of happiness coming from morality and justice. Wealth and pleasure are the lesser form of happiness. So, the cynics, hedonists, and stoics have different notions on how to achieve happiness, as we have just mentioned. And the way one lives is related to good life. Now, when we talk of Nicomachean ethics, it is relation of eudaimonia to arete, referring to virtue, and philia, referring to friendship. Eudaimonia is the end goal of the human action. It is the highest human good. Eudaimonia is not simply a state of mind or being, and the result from value of human activities in order to lead a life. Then we have self actualization. When we say self actualization, it is concept by Abraham Maslow, the highest personal need and desire for fulfillment in achieving the most out of one's potential. In achieving eudaimonia, it is a rational action that arises from friendship, love towards one family, and other concepts such as health, wealth, beauty, and power. And when we say virtue, virtue is the only necessary requirement in order to achieve eudaimonia. That is according to Plato. It refers to excellence, which can either be intellectual or moral. So let us now differentiate intellectual virtue from the moral virtue. First, in the intellectual virtues, it is virtues of thought that usually arises from teaching, and it is episteme, which means scientific knowledge, and phronesis, meaning practical wisdom. While in moral virtue, it is virtue of character, arises from practice or habit. And then also Andrea, referring to bribery, and Sophrosyne, referring to temperance. So again, intellectual virtue is the virtue of thought, while the moral virtue is the virtues of character. Therefore, for our conclusion, good is the aim of all human action. Eudaimonia is the highest human good. And a good life is usually achieved by doing action leading to eudaimonia. Now, again, when we say technology as a way of understanding our world, technology, as we all know, is the application of scientific knowledge to make our lives easier. And then, Heidegger is considered to be one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century because he mostly studied ontology or the philosophical study of being. And so, When question arises concerning technology, he discusses the nature of technology and how it relates to human activity. So again, here are the three main points in his analysis of technology. First, technology is not an instrument. It is a way of revealing the truth about the world. Second, technology is not controlled by humans. It is technology that can control the human activity. And lastly, technology is dangerous in the sense that it frames our thinking about the world. So the term technology is derived from the word technikon, which is related to the word techne. Techne refers to both manufacturing and arts. Techne is part of poiesis, which means bringing forth. Poetry is an example of poiesis. It brings forth the idea of poets. The production of crops by craftsmen is also poiesis. Heidegger also added that the second definition of poiesis is something that brings concealment into unconcealment. So poiesis, therefore, is related to aletheia, which is the Greek word for the truth. So Heidegger believes that the way of revealing in modern technology is not bringing forth. Instead, modern technology reveals by challenging. So windmill is an example of bringing forth technology. Metallurgy can be considered as technology that challenges the earth. So gestel, that is the German word for enframing. It is the process of extraction and transformation. Enframing removes the essence of voices in technology and changes the way human view natural resources. So it can reduce nature into standing reverse. And according to Heidegger, it will come to a point wherein humanity itself becomes a standing reverse. So this is the danger of technology. It is not the essence of technology itself that is dangerous, but the way humans interact with the world from a technological point of view. That's why, in a speech given by Heidegger on 1995, the memorial address, he called the human to practice meditative thinking over the calculative thinking. Now, in Maslow, in Maslow hierarchy of need, it is a motivational theory in psychology comprising a five-tier model of the human needs, often depicted as hierarchical level within a pyramid. Now, the needs lower down in hierarchy must be satisfied before an individual can attend to the needs higher up. So, meaning to say, you must first satisfy what is found on the lower before you can reach the upper one. So, from the bottom of hierarchy upward, the needs are the following. So, ito yung baba at taas. Ano-ano yung pyramid na iyan. First, we have psychological, followed by safety, followed by love and belonging, followed by esteem, and lastly, self-actualization. So the achievement of happiness, according to Aristotle, is the end goal of every man. So his reasoning is this: all human activities are done in order to attain something that is good. We don't do something because we think it will be bad for us. In addition, most of these activities are not the main objective, but rather a means to higher end. Consequently, activity that is an end in itself, writes the pro-life philosopher. in its highest good, and that good is happiness. So we aim at happiness for its own sake, not because it will be achieved something else. So happiness, therefore, is our great mission. Supposing this is to be our aim, Aristotle proceeds in his Nicomachean Ethics to figure out how best to achieve this goal. Therefore, Aristotle starts with a claim that happiness is dependent on the virtue. He describes virtue as a disposition rather than an activity. The individual needs to be naturally a virtuous person rather than just acting accordingly. But what is virtuous? At this moment, our scientific philosopher is uncharacteristically vague. We all know that virtue exists somewhere in the mean, and therefore is being subjective. So the right path lies between the excess and deficiency. And man should not be a coward nor harsh. He shouldn't be wasteful or stingy. He shouldn't be described as worried or acting as a bottom. The pattern is quick to reveal itself. And therefore, in the Aristotelian fashion, there is a need to proceed in an outline form and to categorize all of the virtues and vices in order for us to see them. So it is recommended to have a social virtues of wit, amiability, and sincerity. Modesty is most appropriate among the young, and so on. So that is all for today. And we have finished chapter 6. Okay, class, again, ano mangyayari sa Lunes? I'll give you an asynchronous activity. You have to answer them and bring them on Thursday. You write them in your